We took 3 trips to Russia, 2 on the eastern side to a city named Vladivostock. This involved flying into Vladivostok, it's right on the Pacific, and taking a 36-hour train ride to our destination. The other trip was on the western side to Sergei Posad, which was close to Moscow. On our first trip, we encountered an issue which was going to be a common problem on all of our trips, and it's luggage.
The cartoon shows you us at a train station. 10 minutes before our train was to get in, we were told, you're on the wrong track. It would have involved us going up a huge flight of steps, walking over and coming down another huge flight of steps. Each of us had 2 bags, each of them weighing between 50 and 70 pounds. So we decided we'll just cut across the tracks. Having watched a lot of movies, one of our members actually laid on the track and put her head next to the rail to listen for a train, which I don't know if that works or not, but it seemed like a good idea. And the rest of us formed a human chain to get the bags over to the right place. You'll notice some Russians standing in the back. They didn't volunteer to help us, but they did cheer us on and laugh their heads off at us.
Our jobs involved replacing drafty old windows that had been patched for many years. And we painted frames that they sent us. We purchased those, and when they arrived, we had to do the painting. And it's something that we did on every trip. Paint rollers were unheard of at that time in Russia, so we're very glad that we took some with us. We cleaned windows, and we wished we bought some Windex.
Where we were was a school for the severely hard of hearing, they said, and the mute. And this is one of their teachers, and you can tell she's really exaggerating what she's saying. That's because these kids, most of them, if you're very hard of hearing, you don't learn to speak. So what we found was amazing was how effective, and as an educator, I can tell you, I have never seen a staff that was more dedicated to a bunch of kids than what they were doing. One of the things we had to do was some cement work, and this became one of the jokes of the trip, because one of our members was asked to go help them get some sand. So she said, yes, remember, she doesn't speak any Russian, they don't speak any English. So she said they just walked down the street, saw some sand in somebody's yard, and scooped it into their wheelbarrow and took off. And she came back saying, I'm going to be arrested. But they explained to us that in Russia, everybody owns everything, so it was okay.
On our trip to Sergei Posad, we went on to an orphanage which was for handicapped children and adults. These children had been put into the system and will in most cases probably never get out. In some cases, their parents even had them tested to be put there, as they would get a stipend of a few dollars a month. One of our team members was a special ed teacher who even with the language barrier said some of the kids shouldn't have been there.
Our job here was to replace flooring in a second floor room, which was basically used as a nursery, but it was for children of many ages. And these were kids who were in bed 24/7. And we replaced the flooring and we painted. We found out that most of the mission groups never even got to go up to the second floor, so this was something that they let us up there. Our daughter Sarah was with us, and for some reason, again, remember, my experience with the Russian language was about 6 words. Sarah also did not know any Russian, but the doctor that was there for some reason really liked her. So she was given permission to be up on that second floor a lot. We were sleeping on cots in a couple of classrooms on the first floor, and in the morning when we would wake up, we would hear, Sarah, Sarah, by the kids who wanted her to come up. On most trips, we left booklets behind for the kids, which involved us taking pictures. And because of where we were, we had to use Polaroid. You guys know what a Polaroid picture is? Not black and white. It's a camera that you take a picture and instantly you get a picture.
It spits it out.
Okay. Do you remember seeing pictures of you when you were a baby? Kind of.
Did you recognize yourself?
For a lot of these kids, they had never seen a picture with them in it. And one little boy came up, I handed him his picture, the interpreter was standing there, and he pointed to the picture, and he said to the interpreter, "That little boy has the same shirt on that I have on." So he didn't recognize himself in the picture. It was just something totally foreign.
Here is Sarah playing with two boys from the second floor. They had formed a spoon band and entertained the rest of the kids, and themselves for that matter. A man playing an accordion often joined them. Here you see one of our favorite pictures of all our trips. Sarah appears to be in deep conversation with Dima. Neither of them spoke each other's language, however. Dima was missing an arm and had a club foot, but he was one of the main caretakers of the other second floor children. In the afternoon, he had a boombox and was a DJ for providing music for the other kids. On our second trip to Blagavations, we worked on installing a new floor as well as doing a lot of outside work in their orchard.
One of the other things we did on all our trips was to do crafts with the kids. And I'm sure they're still finding beads in a lot of these places. We always thought, let's make bead bracelets. And there would be beads everywhere, on the floor, everywhere. But I want you to notice in the background there are some what look like really old sewing machines. At this school, the kids had a skill that they could use by the time they left the school, which was much different than the kids we had seen at Sergei Posad, who were probably going to be institutionalized for the rest of their lives. These kids would be able to market themselves as being able to sew, or they had other trades that they taught them at the school. And on both trips to this school, we learned to do this. Once you girls do like that. Hold that. That is sign language for I love you. And we couldn't speak to the kids. We did, but they didn't understand. We didn't. But we would just walk up and down the halls doing this to let them know that we loved them and they loved us.
Two of our trips were taken to the Czech Republic, to a town called Kotovice. These were much different than previous trips, as we were not going to be working with children. But to help with a fledgling Methodist church with a membership of around 50 and attendance of maybe 30. Remember, the Czech Republic had not been under, Czech Republic had been under control first of the Germans and then the Russians. Religion was not allowed. We were asked to start refurbishing an old barn, and that was on the property to make it usable for other groups. The walls were 3 foot thick of stone and mud, and it took all we had with a jackhammer, pickaxes, and other tools to get us started on this project.
My job was just to go around this huge wall, and it was collapsing, so they wanted to get all the old stuff, I don't know, I just know it was hard work to get it out so it could be resurfaced, which they did before we returned.
2 years later, this is the building. We went back to find that this very small church, about the size of ours, had demolished that barn and replaced it with a new 2-story building. They've done just about all the labor themselves. Our jobs were to help with finishing the outside, put in a concrete staircase to the second floor, as well as painting inside and outside.
Perhaps the most difficult trip we took was to India. Every one of our senses was assaulted. The noise was incredible. They beat at each other constantly, so that sound was there all day and most of the night. The smell, there's trash everywhere, and they just consider anywhere to be a toilet. So that smell was incredible. And then there was the food thing. Roger lost 15 pounds. These are some of the girls washing the dishes after we've had lunch. I can tell you that those dish towels hadn't seen a laundry in probably years. And right behind them was a little room, and a woman would sit in there on the concrete floor. She had a one-burner stove, and she would fix our lunch. So we actually landed in Delhi, and then we traveled 25 hours on a train to get to what they call Kolkata, and we usually say Calcutta. We thought the train ride in Russia was a trying thing. This was unbelievable. We actually had to chain our luggage to a pole so that it wouldn't disappear when we were on the train. We could watch, I was on the top one. We could watch mice going in and out and in and out. So I stayed up all night and read. Roger stayed up all night doing something else. He and one of our dear, dear friends had a bad case of Delhi belly.
That's where I lost 15 pounds.
My job while we were there was to go to a school every day and teach some children. And it was a little thatched hut. The little building over the side is an outhouse, but it was padlocked, which was no big deal. We just couldn't use it. We actually sat on the floor, which was mud, so they put tarps on it so we could teach some of the most amazing kids I have ever been around. 3 of us that were there every day all had teaching backgrounds. One of the boys could do double-digit multiplication in his head. Yes, we would race, we'd give him a problem and then hurriedly try to get the answer ourselves before he did. One of the little girls was an avid reader. She just loved everything we brought in that she could possibly read. We left there with incredible prayers that at least some of those kids would get to go on to a higher education. These kids were hand-picked from the slums that surround this school. But we always had kids who literally would stay there the whole time we were there just looking through the window. They didn't have the material we bought, but they could listen to us.
Meanwhile, back at Smile 1, this was kind of the headquarters of the operation. The women were teaching kids while we men were building. One of our main jobs was to break in the courtyard and a path that would eventually be covered with cement to lead to a medical building that was going to be built on that property. Other jobs involved painting and carpentry. You might see something strange. This is their idea of a drill. And in a country that seemed to be just about everyone had cell phones, power tools were unknown.
We took turns in the morning going to the train station to help take care of what were called the train kids. These were kids who mostly did not have parents, and they just were street kids. Okay, what did you guys have for breakfast?
Cereal.
Cereal? Is that what you usually have, cereal?
I have
Banana?
Pancakes, eggs, and bacon.
Okay. We took with us, when we went to see these kids, each of them got a banana, a piece of bread, and half a glass of milk. And for some of those kids, that was about it. Otherwise, they begged the rest of the day for food. It was hard to watch them. They were so excited we were there. We would give them each a piece of paper that had words on it or letters that they could copy, and then we usually had numbers that they could copy. We'd hand them a marker. Everybody brought the marker back. I mean, it was just, these kids' respect for each other and for us was just amazing. We took soap, bars of soap, and we bathed them. This was either in the fountains inside the train station or the fountains outside the train station. And you can imagine these kids, I mean, their eyes are like this, looking at us like, what are you doing? We had to put their dirty clothes back on, because if we put clean clothes back on them, the kids wouldn't have taken them, but some of the adults would have seen, new clothes, something we can steal. One of the people that went with us was a doctor, and he did try to do what he could do, but he could only refer the very, very worst cases. Because because he couldn't hand out medicine because there was nobody there to monitor when they took it or anything. So basically, he would just go around and look for people who obviously needed some help.
Right. The trip to Mexico was to Rio Bravo, which is right across from Texas border. This trip is not always taken due to violence of the drug cartels in the area. We were told to stay in our compound at night and to always go as a group from place to place. Now our job there was to build casitas, which were Mexican word for little houses. This measured about 9 by 16 foot. They're constructed of cement blocks. No plumbing or electricity is included, but it's just a shelter for the family. There is a loft in each of them, and there's been a huge waiting list for these casitas, as they provide a secure and weatherproof shelter for many who have been living in makeshift housing. We're able to build 2 of these and to do some other construction work on a nearby church.
In the afternoon, some of our team worked in a medical clinic. Some of us went to a church to do Bible school. Somehow we managed to enact Noah's Ark. I don't know, it was different. And then we thought it would be really neat to leave them a quilt with their handprints in paint. Not such a good idea. There was paint on us, there was paint all over the church, but the kids thought it was a great idea.
The families who received casitas just couldn't stop thanking us, and they did feed us, and their food was awesome.
The next 2 trips just involved Sarah and myself, as Roger was getting a little concerned about the heat, because the 2 places we went were Haiti and Tanzania. Our team went the year after the earthquake. The destruction was absolutely unbelievable. There were many times we'd be in our bus and we would have to detour because the roads were just too bad for us to take. Most of the people were living in tents, waiting for something to be constructed. Again, trash was a major issue. I don't know if you can see them, but those blobs are pigs that are sorting. In India, it was cows sorting through the trash. Here it was pigs sorting through the trash. We actually were on a medical trip, but the hospital that we were visiting had a school that adjoined it. The hospital had been built by our host, who was a doctor, and he had had that hospital built to withstand an earthquake, so it had not been damaged. This is a doctor, a resident, and a nurse, and they did surgery just about 12 hours a day while we were there. Our job, again, was to work with the kids, and we again did crafts with them. This little girl has learned to knit, and she gave me that pink scarf, and I sent her back a huge, huge box of yarn so that she could keep doing things. This was my, it seems like on every trip we just hit one kid that you think, whoa. We were painting, and I looked behind the desk, and here was this little guy with a book. And he was so excited. It was his book. We had given him a book he could call his own. He couldn't read it, but it was his book. And if you'll notice the hat on his head, I thought, go Lions, one of these years. And finally, the trip that probably affected our lives the most, because as most of you know, our daughter is currently in Tanzania teaching. Sarah and I went to an orphanage in Tanzania. Do you know where Tanzania is? Of course, you can look up here now and see. I never even heard of it. Being a teacher here, never heard of Tanzania. I did get out a map the night before we left because I thought, maybe I should see where we're flying out to tomorrow. It's kind of a country that stays under the radar as far as Africa and a lot of things that occur there. It is. Many of the children are at that orphanage because of AIDS. Their parents had died because of AIDS. We again did crafts, never gave up. Here we're doing an Eye of God, the yarn thing where you go round and round. This little girl, I showed her how. Well, she absolutely was doing things I had never dreamed of doing with an Eye of God. You'll notice the short hair. They all have. I don't care if you're a girl or a boy, they had short hair. That was because of the lice issue with the kids living so close to each other. It was summer, so they really were on break, but we did do lessons with the kids every morning. And again, they are learning English because in Tanzania, as in much of Africa, all secondary education is totally done in English. They feel that that is the language that's going to possibly get the kids ahead. So we did do lessons with them. Okay, at this moment I said goodbye to my daughter. I knew this was it. Brenda was going off to wherever. Riding on the back of a motorcycle is something I had never done in my life, but I was told if I was going to this place that they wanted me to go to, this was it. Okay, I want you guys to say something. Poli poli.
Holy, holy.
In Tanzanian or in Kiswahili, that means slow. So the entire time I'm on this bike, I'm going, poli poli, poli poli. And I finally stopped. He spoke enough English to turn around and say to me, lady, I can't go any slower. I'm sure I can't go just a little bit slower. One of the other things we did was we paid for a goat. They didn't have goats at this place. They had their own farm. They did not have goats. And goats can be an incredible source of milk and meat. So we paid for a goat. We built the pens. These kids had great fun playing like they were eating out of the troughs. I'm very happy to report that same team, who were from Iowa, went back there this last spring. The goats are there. There's actually a herd of goats now. So we were successful. And who can go to Africa without seeing some of the other animals? This was at an orphanage for elephants. Their moms had been, most of them had been killed by poachers. So they raised these elephants, and then they, to a certain size, and then they put them out in the wild. And we were really fortunate. We got to go out in Serengeti and see quite a bit of the bigger animals. In doing this program, Roger and I went through what seemed like thousands of pictures to pick out some pictures for today. And I can tell you it brought smiles, it brought tears, it brought longing to go back to some of these places, wondering what in the world has happened to some of the kids that we saw. On our first trip, we met a group who had written a book, and if you can see it, it is called The Collection of the Letters to the Soviet Peace Fund and the Soviet Women's Committee. This was a group of moms who wrote a letter saying, can't we have peace? Now remember that Roger and I grew up during the Cold War. Russia were bad guys. But here we are talking with a bunch of mothers who wanted exactly the same thing that we wanted, which was for us to find some love and peace in this world. And the final slide is one of my favorites. This is Roger walking with the bus driver that we had in India, Hindu. We had just come from putting some of our son's ashes in the Ganges, and by the way, all rivers in India are the Ganges. He had told us what to do, and the compassion and love that man showed us that day, and the compassion and love we were able to show back to him, that's what fuels these trips. It's just this unbelievable connection. People will say, why don't you just send money? You know, you spend so much to go on these trips, why don't you just send money? Because that connection would not be there. I know we'll never forget him, and I'll bet he'll never forget us. So that really is why we're presenting this today. All of us can be hands and feet. This church, one of the reasons Roger and I came to this church, the footprint of this church is huge. To be around this church and watch what we do for the other people in this community is just awesome. And I guess what we're hoping is that not only will that continue, but some of you, especially the younger ones, will have that footprint reach outside of the area and extend to other places